All right. Hi, Jace. Thank you so much for joining us. For everyone who's watching, Jace is a senior member of technical staff at Salesforce. He's also worked as a software engineer at Amazon. Today, we're going to be talking about coding rounds, system design rounds, both of them in depth. So this video is going to be really important and is going to be very valuable for someone who's trying to crack coding and system design rounds, someone who's trying to, who's aspiring for a full stack or a backend role at any of the top tier companies. All right. So Jace, let's start with coding.
Sure.
What if you had to highlight, just give us a quick introduction to the curriculum in coding rounds, in DSA rounds, precisely, what would that be? What is really a part of DSA coding questions? What are the few
Sure.
topics that are the most critical, or something that you see that it's a must have? You need to crack. You need to be really good at these topics if you need to crack DSA coding rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. So, real quick, the what's usually what usually happens in a data structure and algorithm interview is you introduce yourself to the interviewer, and the interviewee introduce themselves. I think this is a big part of the interview. So every interview, including the data structures and algorithms, they're going to always ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself. Um, and personally, I think this is a really overlooked section of the interview. I think this is a chance for the interviewer to build rapport with the interviewer, as well as they can kind of gauge what your personality is like and your seniority level in just the introduction alone. Even though it's only 2-3 minutes, I think it's very much worth spending the time to write and rehearse it, watch your tempo, and really get the content right. So after the introduction, you usually have the interviewer introduce the question, and then I would take some time digesting it on my own. And then that's usually, depending on how long the introductions take, but you could expect somewhere at like Amazon, I had 25 minutes to work on the data structure and algorithm question. And then after that, you kind of just review it together, discuss time and space complexity. And I think both at the beginning and the end of solving the problem is when you really highlight your technical communication and your ability to discuss complex technical topics. And then after that, it's just they open it up for questions, and then you say goodbye. And I think, again, this is another point that you want to highlight, that you can speak in a professional technical manner, even just saying goodbye in the way that you ask questions. So yeah, that's it. That's it as far as like what happens in the technical interview. And then the second part of your question is like, what are the important topics?
Yeah.
I already discussed like technical communication. Obviously, you would want to not only solving the problem is only a fraction, even though it's a large fraction. There are other things that you would want to focus on, like technical communication, professional demeanor. But on top of that, as far as like technical concepts, basic data structure stuff, hash maps, the when to use a map set or an array, and the time complexity for that stuff. I'm straying from the true point. The true point is really you would want to be able, in my opinion, anything regarding trees and graphs. So anything regarding DFS or BFS, depth first search or breadth first search. In my opinion, and I've seen some people allude to this online as well, is I think those account for about 70% of the problems you're going to see.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the most common patterns I would say is obviously depth first search, breadth first search, Dijkstra's algorithm, topological sort. I think there might be, yeah, I think that would probably be most of it. Obviously, there's other topics like the two-pointer sorting, whatever there are. But to me, DFS and BFS are going to be the most common topics.
All
I think
right.
at Amazon, of
Yeah.
the 4 coding questions or the 5 coding questions, I think 3 or 4 of them were DFS and BFS.
All right. So, Jace, apart from Amazon, you said 4 or 5 coding questions. Is this about the same with all other tier one companies, or does that vary based on your experience?
Um, like obviously Netflix and Salesforce, that wasn't the case. They don't do the run of the mill Amazon, Facebook, Google type 3 coding round or 2 coding rounds or 3 coding rounds, 1 system design and then 1 behavioral. But for the most part, as far as Google, Amazon, that's kind of what you're looking at.
All right. Um, you know, this is another important question. Like, people keep asking, that how do I be Google material? How do I get, what is that X factor that's needed to get hired by Google? So I'm going to throw that question to you on Amazon. What is it really that interviewers are looking for, hiring managers are looking for in a candidate, that sets you apart from everyone else? I understand concepts and coding and all of that aside, but is there
Mm-hmm.
something else that they're looking
Yeah.
for?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we could call it, there's tons of different names for it, but obviously emotional intelligence or self-awareness is, it's very important, right? In my opinion, you could absolutely crush the question, whether it's a
Yeah.
data structure, algorithm, system design.
Yeah.
But if you don't display a certain level of self-awareness
Mm-hmm.
or professional demeanor or emotional intelligence, then those are going to count against you, right? Every company has differences in the culture that they're in the cultural fit that they're looking for, right? With Amazon, it's very much delivery oriented, right? Are you the type of person that we're going to need to babysit, or are you the type of person that's going to take the baton and run independently?
Yeah.
Are you going to be the type of person that's going to ask questions or do whatever it takes to get unblocked when you're blocked, right? I think as far as Amazon, I think that's what they're looking for. As far as Google, it's not so much that aggressive delivery, but it's how can you work well with other people? Can you maintain a positive attitude? And on the topic of emotional intelligence, there's actually a really great book. It's called Search Inside Yourself. It was
Jace,
written
I'm
by, I
sorry, your
think it was
voice
like,
is cracking up. It's not coming
you know
in
what?
clear.
It could be my AirPods are dying. Let me just change these out.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Um,
So you were saying in terms of when it comes to Google, they're not that aggressive.
I think with Google, you're obviously going to want to display that you are the type of person that's going to independently solve your own problems,
Yeah.
as well as help others solve theirs. But also, there's more. I spend more time talking about like a positive attitude and inherent optimism, and that approach that I take to my daily life. So I think it's kind of just like, but the thing is, these have to be part of who you are,
Yeah.
Yeah. As a person. But I think in the end, again, it still boils down to emotional intelligence, independent problem solving, self-awareness, and having a positive mindset, right?
Yeah. So, Jason, your experience, what do you think is the most common mistakes that candidates make in coding rounds? Again, apart from actually making a mistake with the coding problem, but in general, what do most people get wrong with coding rounds?
I really think when I do mock interviews for students, this isn't going to be a direct question, so I'll just give that disclaimer first of all. But when I give interviews to IK students, I always ask, how many mocks have you had? Because that allows me to see the arc of their trajectory, right? And usually if they're in if it's only been like their third mock or less, for a lot of them, it's kind of a shock to see where the bar actually is, how high the bar actually is.
Yeah.
And I'll say this: we at IK, we do set the bar at a higher level than you would any other program that I've seen.
Yeah.
And we are going to nitpick certain things that other interview programs or that students might not even see on their own, right?
Yeah.
I had a student who had 5 years at a tier 1 company, and in his mock interview, he started using single character variables, right? Some people might call that nitpicky, but at IK, that's a no-no, right? Like, we're gonna say don't do that. So I think at the first part of as they're going through their mocks, they're going to start seeing how high the bar is. And then later on, they're going to start working on technical communication, right? They're going to start noticing, I'm not explaining my solution prior to delivery and post-delivery of that solution. I'm not explaining it as well as I could. So then they're going to start working on that. And the tip that I always give to students to work on their technical communication is, when you're practicing, write down your solution and write down the explanation of your solution, because writing is the best way you're going to improve in verbal technical communication. And then I think in the third phase, students are really just honing in on technical topics. That's when it comes down to, can you solve whatever it's called? I think it's called Alien Dictionary, which is elite code hard, right? Can you solve that? Can you discuss, can you deliver topological sort in 25 minutes?
Yeah.
Can you give an explanation of the time complexity of Dijkstra's, right? Dijkstra's algorithm. So that's kind of what I see the arc is, and that's why I encourage students to use all of your mock interviews. Do not, I see a lot of students, I've heard of only a few students, like most students don't use all of them, and I'm a real stickler about that. I always tell students, use every single one of your mock interviews, because sure, you don't need it for this interview. You might be able to get a job after 5 mock interviews, but you're going to still be investing in, what if you want to go interview in 3 more years to get 30% more on your salary, right? You're investing in the future. Sorry, that was like a really long answer. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. So, Jace, apart from, IK students, now that, we do have, we also want to help people who are not in the program through our videos on YouTube. So, if someone doesn't want to pay for a mock interview or cannot afford it at this time, can they do that with a friend, or, can they do that with a colleague? And if they're doing it with someone who is not an interviewer, doesn't work at an Amazon like you or any other instructors of IK, how can they go about with, getting this sort of help?
It's very limited.
Yeah.
I've seen the material online. Like the thing is, there's so much. I still haven't seen a curriculum that's as good as IK's. I think now there's like grokking, there's neat code, there's the blind 75.
There's interviewing.io, right? Which only is a mock interview solution. It's just for mock interviews.
And I did that too.
Okay.
I did that in preparation for Salesforce. I think I spent like $2,000 and it wasn't worth it. So like the 3 that I called out, right? Neat code, leak code, blind 75, grokking. Those are going to give you a question list.
Yeah.
But as far as digesting the content and really knowing it really well, I still think IK's curriculum helped prepare me for that a lot better. So those will help, and you can get an offer with those things. But I think what is the word that I'm looking for? The word's not coming to mind, but your ability to really deeply understand those topics so that they serve you for the remainder of your career. Like, it's pretty limited. It's really up to each individual how much time they spend on it. As far as the like what you're gonna get, as far that's just like the question, the topic stuff. But as far as like training, like actually doing a mock interview, yeah, it'll help to work with somebody that to like do the two-way interview.
Yeah.
Like where you interview somebody and they interview you. That's definitely gonna help, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna definitely give you an idea of how you're performing, what you could do better.
Yeah.
But I can say this, like with me now, I've given hundreds of interviews for IK. And so I've become really good at giving interviews and giving feedback, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't me bragging. This is me, like, I would think that, I would hope that after spending so much time in helping prepare students for their interviews, that I've gotten better at it, right? Like, because that's something that I consciously make an effort of. Like, how can I get better? How can I deliver more to the students?
Yeah.
So is it possible? Yes, very possible. But IK, this is what we do, and this is what we do well, you know. And I will say this: there's as an interviewer, as a mentor for IK, it's so awesome. I get messages on LinkedIn every now and then from students that thank me for helping them, and they message me to tell me like, "Oh, you helped." Like I had one that was really awesome. He was at. This gentleman was at a minimum wage job, got his first engineering gig, and then he went through the IK program, and then like less than 6 months later, he was at Google, right?
Wow.
And he messaged me to thank me about that, and to me, that was like one of my first success stories, and I think that was like in my first 6 months that I was I was a mentor for IK, and so that was really encouraging. That's what made me want to continue being a mentor for IK. So that was awesome.
So Jace,
sorry, long-winded answer again.
No problem. So Jace, when you were interviewing for Amazon, how did you prep? You know, were there any, what are the resources that you used?
Yeah. So I kind of followed the IK curriculum to a T, right? I did the IK questions, and then that was for data structures and algorithms. The system design that IK did was good. It was really helpful, but I was so lacking on the system design side that I needed like that I felt like I wanted to supplement it. So I went with grokking, and that was probably that time wasn't as efficiently used. And then I finished all my mock interviews. I think I was 15 or 16. I did every single one. As far as like data structures and algorithms, my personal process was I compiled all the IK questions, as well as I think I probably tacked on another 30 to 50 other leak code questions to the list, and I just went through each one and I tried to solve each one in 25-30 minutes. And if I was able to solve it in 25-30 minutes, it went in the done pile. If I was not able to, I put it on the bottom of the list, and I just did that on rinse and repeat. I was fortunate at the time. My job kind of transitioned me to, they shut down the department. My job at the time shut down my department. So they transitioned me to a different department. But in that time, there was like 3 months of, I think I had 5 to 10 hours of work a week. So I was able to dedicate something like 40 to 60 hours a week preparing.
Nice.
So that was, I got really fortunate there. And so it was a lot of hours. I think I will say this. I think I started at a lower, I was not prepared. When I say that I started the IK curriculum, I think I was below average on what IK students come in at. I don't have a CS background. I became a software engineer through a boot camp. Prior to that, I was a project manager for 10 years. So my technical concepts weren't, I had very little knowledge of data structures and algorithms and system design. I think I was like 3 years into my software engineering career. And so I would consider myself below average as far as my interviewing skills. And I would say it took me 400 to 500 hours of really focused study time, right? And that might sound like a lot to some people, but looking back, as far as like the return on an investment, it's ridiculous, right? Like the impact that it's made to my salary and the level of jobs that I could get now, it's amazing. Like, return on investment is incalculable.
So what kept you motivated to go through your prep, or did you have any certain study strategies, like, you know, you're the most productive in the morning, or, you know, or do you write down everything that you make a log of errors? Like, what was your strategy to go through this intensive prep?
I think one thing that I like about the IK curriculum is that, well, I think now we're kind of touching on like, what is my mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like, what drove me to study 400 to 500
that
hours?
much.
That's a lot of hours.
Yes.
Right. And then there's a second portion of that. That's, what was your personal process for studying? How did you approach studying? Right. So I'll touch on the mindset portion of this first. And what I was saying earlier was that some things that I really liked that I saw in the IK curriculum was like having a growth mindset is built into the program. That's huge. I think that's absolutely huge. And then building positive, constructive habits is also built into the program. And I think if you don't have those two things, you're not going to have the self-belief or the drive to do this very difficult thing, right? For yourself, for your family, for your career. And there was something in my mindset that clicked in week one. I think in the very first lecture, even up until the first lecture, doing the prep work, I still wasn't sure if I made the right decision. And then in the very first lecture, I think we were like an hour and a half in, and I was like, I've learned more in an hour and a half than I have in 2 months of self-studying. Like, this was the right decision. And from that, I just got obsessed. I was like, this is possible. I know I could get into Faang. And my mindset became, I'm getting into Faang or I'm busting. Like, I wouldn't recommend anybody else do this, but I didn't apply to anything else besides Faang.
So, Jace, I don't know if this will, it's to add to your point, but a lot of our students who enroll in the program, we see whoever, decides to not go ahead with the program in week one, 80% of them do that because they feel that the program is too tough and that they cannot go through with it. Maybe, we see more of those people who have families, who have to give family time. That's when they find it all the more difficult. But yeah, it's a lot of commitment. Yeah. So
it's a huge commitment.
Yeah, go ahead. So what was your study process? What were your study strategies?
So, this is going to make me sound a lot more disciplined and like a harder worker than I really am. I promise I think I'm like an average person, but I wake up around 4 to 5 a.m. every day. I have a green drink. I personally don't eat breakfast. Sometimes I would work out. Maybe 2-3 days a week I would work out, and then I'm in front of the computer by 6 a.m. And then from there, I am grinding until I take a break about 10 or 11 a.m.
Wow.
And then depends on if I have the energy. maybe drink a cup of coffee, and then get back and try to grind for 2-3 more hours. Some days I didn't have it in me. Some days I wouldn't even make it to 10 in the morning.
Okay.
I'll say that. And then some days I would just be in flow state. I would be having so much fun. I would be feeling like I was growing. I would be enjoying myself to the extent where I would go like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Right? But those were rare. And a lot of the process of over the 3 to 4 month time that I was studying, it was a lot of trial and error, right? It was me trying to find my own process. And it was through trial and error where I found like, oh, if I start at 10 a.m., I'm screwed because I'm only going to be productive I'm going to start getting hungry. I'm going to start needing a nap by noon. And then also finding out, okay, working out every day before I study isn't always good. But some days it's the days where I feel like I need a workout that I would get one in, right? Again, this is one of those things where it indicates that I have a ton of flexibility with my time, right? I know a lot of parents won't have this.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about how grateful and fortunate I am that I was able to find IK at this point in my life where I have the flexibility with my time. That window opened up in my work schedule. And then some other things that I recommend to students that worked for me is, again, I compiled that list and then I worked through that list and moved it to the done pile. I set a timer for every question that I did. I spent a lot of time reviewing after I attempted a solution. I reviewed other people's solutions.
Okay.
And I wrote notes about my solution. I did a lot of writing in English, not coding, about solutions. And I felt that was going to increase my retention regarding problems. I'm huge on the Pomodoro timer. That's really important. The Pomodoro timer. This is working in like 20 to 25 minute blocks of time, right? But in those 20 to 25 minute blocks of time, you're absolutely focused. I do not look at my phone. All my notifications are turned off. And so as I'm finishing a Pomodoro timer block, I would write one check, right? And then so at the end of my day, I have positive feedback of, okay, I completed 8 checks today, 5 checks. 8 checks is a lot. Well, 8 checks is like what I would get to the minimum to. And then only after I finished a Pomodoro timer block is when I would allow myself to look at my notifications, maybe do a little bit of meditation, take a deep breath, take a break, go get some water, use the bathroom. I think that was that was about my personal process.
Yeah. So, Jace, before I move to system design, I wanted to touch up on one more question with coding, with DSA. Sure. Do you think interviewers prefer a certain coding round and a certain coding programming language? Yeah. Do they prefer a certain program? Ignore me. A certain programming language, or when do you pick? Do you have the flexibility to pick the programming language that you're coding in? And how do you make that choice if you have if you know 2 or 3 different programming languages?
Go with the one that you're strongest and most fluid in. When I going into Amazon, I did because I went to a coding bootcamp. JavaScript is my strongest. And then when I was leaving Amazon, I was thinking I'm going to try to do it in Python. I'm pretty good with Python. And I felt like I was the fluidity. I immediately lost so much speed and fluidity that it just wasn't worth the effort. I didn't want to tack on an extra 100 hours of studying for the same results. Right. And I really think that's a relevant metric. So again, go with what you're most fluid in and what you have the most fun in.
And it doesn't matter. Interviewers will not grade you differently if you use a different programming language. Okay.
Nope. Not at all. I've never seen somebody do it. I mean, especially when when you're at Amazon, when you're at a company like Amazon and Salesforce and these tier one companies, nobody cares about what language. Nobody asks you, "Oh, are you good with JavaScript? Are you good with Python? We're going to assign this work to you." That's not a prerequisite to any work you're assigned. You're just assigned work, and you're expected to learn that language, right? Like at Salesforce, I've written in 4 or 5 different languages already, and I've only been there for like 8 months, right? At Amazon, I was writing in 8 different languages, right? So, yeah, I think just go with whatever you're strongest in. It doesn't matter.
So we have some students who, are in the program who are familiar with C. They're not familiar with Python that much. And I was doing a few calls with some students and they brought that up that, they feel like because they don't know Python, they might, they don't feel that confident and they feel like, they need to learn that language. That is why I was just wondering because this is, I think, something that our students feel when they don't know Python, and most of the live classes at IK and the coding sessions, the coding classes are in Python. So, we do see students feeling a little worried about that aspect of not knowing the programming language.
Yeah, my recommendation is don't spend the mental energy and emotional energy worrying about that because it doesn't matter.
All right. So, Jace, moving to system design, what are the most critical topics there? Like, you mentioned that trees and graphs hold 70% in DSA. What is it like in system design?
Yeah. This is system design isn't my forte. I wouldn't say I'm great at it. And I'm pretty confident going to data structures and algorithms, but system design is really, there are the base concepts that you're going to need to know, right? Like basic networking. I probably shouldn't have started with that one. Like race conditions, design, optimization, scalability, a little bit of networking. There are those base concepts, but in the end, what they're looking for is can they have a professional, mature, technical conversation with another engineer, right? I think we get too hung up on. You're gonna give me a query. I'm gonna draw this beautiful image, and we're gonna be done, right? Or and that's not really. Although those aspects are important, I think it comes down to, are we going to have an intelligent software engineering conversation where at the end of it, the interviewer is going to say, oh, he knows his stuff, right? Yeah, I think that's what really system design comes down to. And one example is the system design that got me my awesome job now at Salesforce.
Yeah,
It's really me having a 50-minute. We honestly didn't even want the conversation to end because we were laughing a lot, and we were having a good time talking about building data pipelines and AWS Glue, which is a wrapper around Apache Spark. It's AWS's solution for data pipelines. And we were just talking about all the pain points and what we built in that, right? And immediately from that conversation, he knew that I have experience building data pipelines and I have used AWS tools to do so, right? And we didn't even get to drawing anything. Like we just had a conversation. And so that's what I think about system design stuff. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
All
good.
right. Coming to behavioral rounds, you touched upon this a little bit when you mentioned that, you don't start coding, you build that rapport initially, you tell them a little bit about yourself. But, let's dive deeper into behavioral rounds. What would be your 3 golden tips to crack behavioral rounds?
Yeah.
Or we can look at mistakes to avoid. We can do either. Yeah.
No, I think I can answer the first one.
Yeah.
Tips. First, write and rehearse all your questions. you're right. Fifty. Identify 50 about, yeah, I would say 50 behavioral questions. They don't necessarily need to be geared to each specific company, because for the most part, you're going to get a lot of overlap between Google, Amazon, and all the other companies.
Yeah.
Identify the 50 behavioral questions and then write responses to them, right? And this is the basic STAR or SAR method I think people are going with these days. And then rehearse giving those responses or answers. So that's tip one. Tip two is really write and rehearse. But like, one thing that I give to some homework that I give to a lot of students is to find somebody that you look up to, maybe of the same cultural background as you, right? Somebody that I always pull up during our mock interviews is I show them an interview with Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, or Reed Hastings, Netflix CEO. And I say, watch them give an interview, right? Watch them speak and connect with the interviewer. They have professional coaching and they do this a lot, so they're really good at it. But pay attention to the tempo that they speak with. Pay attention to the tone. So are they monotone? Are they not monotone? How are they connecting with the interviewer, right? When I'm giving interviews, I've done it with you a couple of times. I make sure that I use hand gestures, right? You see me using hand gestures. People can hear you smile. So it's important that you smile in interviews, as well as don't talk too fast or too low, right? Like one thing that we'll hear some students do is they'll say something, what I do when I'm preparing for interviews is I have a list of 100 questions. I attempt to each question in 25 minutes, right? Like that's not how you engage with somebody. That's not how you connect with somebody, right? And so watch a YouTube video of somebody that you look up to being interviewed and try to obviously put your own spin on it, but try to mimic them. See what they're doing right and see what you want to work into yours. And then the third tip is really practice emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence or self-awareness is a skill. Being patient, empathetic, and connecting with another human being is something that is very beneficial professionally and personally, right? Understand what it means to be empathetic and communicate and connect with somebody. Because not only are you going to do that in your interviews, but you're going to have to do that on the job and in your personal life too. And I think we as engineers, we overlook this drastically. So yeah, those are probably my top 3 tips.
So I'm going to ask you a tricky question now, Jace. So you mentioned that, when you were interviewing with Salesforce in your system design round, you just spoke about data pipelines with the interviewer. So do you think that it's, what can get you the interview? Having high EQ or getting to the solution? Is it very important to get to the solution? Will you still get the job if you don't get the solution? Or does EQ, is EQ the most important thing?
Well, let's not overlook technical aptitude, right? Like, are we talking about system design or data structures and algorithms?
We're talking, let's say both. Like if you don't reach a solution, if you cannot reach the optimal solution that the interviewer is looking for, will you like 100% not get the job?
No, absolutely not. It's just the solution. The solution for data structures and algorithms is, it's not subjective.
There's a right answer. There's always a right answer. Right? Yeah.
But the solution for systems design is, does this guy have good professional experience and can he communicate his professional experience? So it's a much more subjective, fluid answer. I think it is important to deliver your solution, and that is the bare minimum. But like I said, it's the bare minimum, right? It's not like deliver your solution, mic drop, I'm out of here. Like there's a lot that goes into delivering your solution, and part of that is, can you communicate your solution? Yeah.
So we see a lot of students who think that, they don't need behavioral training, training on clearing behavioral rounds. They think they don't need help with resumes and, all of the career aspects of it. And then we see students coming back and saying that they failed an interview because they did not focus on these rounds. Because I think a lot of engineers feel like, that can be done. We can always, there's nothing much to be done for a behavioral round. So what's your take there? How important are behavioral rounds? You said getting to the solution maybe is not always needed in system design rounds, but you do need it in data science, in DSA. But what about behavioral?
Behavioral, I mean, assuming that you crushed the data structures and algorithms and system design, assuming that you crush those, the behaviorals it'll quickly lose you. I mean, it would suck to invest all that time in data structures and algorithms and then system design, and then you don't get a gig because of behavioral, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you boil it down to fundamental principles in an interview, they're looking at for, can he or she do the job well? And do people in my organization want to work with him or her? Right? Like if you get a no to either one of those, you're not getting the gig. And again, behavioral things are just as difficult to explain and discuss and communicate as technical topics, right? Telling a story without telling a story in a clear, concise manner and conveying an idea in a clear, concise manner are very, very difficult, and it takes practice, especially when you're under a nervous situation.
Yeah. All right. So Jace, I had a last question for you, which is around the job market. So, we have a research team internally at IK, and what we've been tracking, which companies are posting how many new jobs, and are they hiring? Are they on a hiring freeze? We noticed that Salesforce posted 2,800 new jobs between July 27th and September 6th, which is a massive number. And after them, of course, next in line is like Google and Apple also are hiring, but not that much. So what is your take on, these companies that are saying they're on a hiring freeze, but we're also seeing good enough jobs in the market? Do you think it's stabilizing, or are layoffs still happening? What's your take on this whole scenario that's happening in the US? It's also happening in India.